fourth grade Unit 5, students are going to compare, add, and subtract fractions. When we compare fractions, the standard is really specific about the idea that there is a lot more ways to do it than just using equivalent fractions, which is the most common way, and I think the way adults do it. In fact, we're going to teach the kids 5 ways. Comparing numerators, that's when students have the same denominator already and can decide which is bigger. Comparing denominators, that's when the numerator is the same, so we know that we have the same number, and we're asking ourselves how the pie was cut. Using 1 as a benchmark, which we do when 2 fractions are each the same number of pieces away from one whole, and thinking about the size of the missing piece. Using half as a benchmark, when there's one number that is less than half and one number that is more than half, then we can tell that the one bigger than half is bigger. And then finally, using equivalent fractions. So if we can't use any of these strategies, then we can take 2 fractions and change them so that they have common denominators. But we really are going to have to push our students to not falling back on this strategy simply because it is so rote, because you don't always have a pencil and paper to do this strategy, and we want them to be able to do these first if they can. It also saves them time. For addition and subtraction of mixed numbers, there's a huge emphasis on word problems. And again, we are wanting to not just replace mixed numbers with equivalent fractions. In other words, if we're trying to do this, to replace it with this, which is some pretty big numbers and kind of unnecessarily lots of number crunching, but to think of other ways to get this answer, like adding up or just borrowing one whole and changing one whole. Denominators only go as high as 12 for most of this, though they do sometimes go as high, just also include in 100, especially when we get into decimals. We also introduced 2-step word problems because we've been doing a lot with 1-step word problems by this point, and so with whole numbers we start to do 2-step word problems. And it's a really long unit because we do a lot of going back and spiraling and kind of pushing it 1 step farther. So going back to equivalent fractions, going back to mixed numbers, going back to multiplication and repeated addition of fractions. And all fraction standards are considered major content, so students will have to write justifications and explain their reasoning.